melody of love. In my heart there rings a melody, there rings a melody with heaven's harmony. In my heart there rings a melody, there rings a melody of love. I love the Christ who died on Calvary, for he washed my sins away. He put within my heart a melody, and I know it's there to stay. In my heart there rings a melody, there rings a melody with heaven's harmony. In my heart there rings a melody, there rings a melody of love. 'Twill be my endless theme in glory, with the angels I will sing. 'Twill be a song with glorious harmony, when the courts of heaven ring. In my heart there rings a melody, there rings a melody with heaven's harmony. In my heart there rings a melody, there rings a melody of love.
Good morning. It's good to be with you in this way today. I'm going to try something a little different this week. As you know, we're going to have outdoor worship. You're welcome to join us. Come on, drive down and join us if you like. We'll also be doing the same next week, hopefully, if the weather permits. But for you who are staying safe at home, I wanted to make sure that you had the sermon, and we'll have some music from Lydia and Martin as well. But I hope that you will enjoy this and find this worshipful as well. Know that it's the same sermon that we're all hearing this week. And again, you can send your prayer requests in to me and send your offerings in as you have been doing. I thank you so much for that, for the ways you continue to be faithful. And our work continues in the food pantry and in our children's ministry and in all the ways that we can reach out. Today we're going to be talking about laughter, though. Just a little bit of a break. I'm going to read from Genesis chapter 18 and Genesis chapter 21. The Lord appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre. He sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. He looked up and saw 3 men standing near him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent entrance to meet them and bowed down to the ground. He said, "My Lord, if I find favor with you, do not pass your servant. Let a little water be brought and wash your feet, and the rest yourselves under the tree. Let me bring a little bread that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come up to your servant." So they said, "Do as you have said." And Abraham hastened into the tent to Sarah and said, "Make ready quickly 3 measures of choice flour, knead it and make cakes." And Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to the servant who'd hastened to prepare it. Then he took curds and milk and the calf that he'd prepared and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree while they ate. They said to him, "Where is your wife Sarah?" He said, "There in the tent." Then one said, "I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent entrance behind them. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. He'd ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I have grown old and my husband is old, shall I have pleasure?" The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?' Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? At the set time I will return to you in due season, and Sarah shall have a son." But Sarah denied, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. And he said, "Oh, yes, you did laugh." And for the rest of the story, starting in chapter 21, the Lord dealt with Sarah as he said. The Lord did for Sarah as he had promised. Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, in the time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to his son, whom Sarah bore him. Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, and God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And now Sarah said, God has brought laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh with me. And she said, who would ever have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, back when I received the newspaper, would pick it up on Sunday, one of the first places that I would go to look would be the comics section. And now that I think about it, I'm a little sad, really, that my kids probably don't even know what the Sunday comics look like, because I can't remember the last time we had a Sunday paper. I learned this week on the internet, so it must be true, that Solomon, a very wise man in the Bible, might have been the one who started the trend of making the comics big and in color. Because he said, a glad heart makes a cheerful face, but heartache crushes the spirit. You could translate that, I suppose, as a playful disposition will affect your entire outlook, attitude, and health. Rita Miller's a therapist at a hospital. She works to get stress lowered in patients' lives, to jumpstart the healing process. And Rita usually takes on some of the toughest patients at the hospital, those who've been told to get their house in order, the people who have absolutely nothing to laugh about. But Rita is a very unusual therapist. She's a laughter specialist. She uses laughter in a healing way. She's experienced what Solomon discovered: a glad heart makes a cheerful face, and healing to the bones. Her work is especially useful with older adults, and she saw that with the aging process, pain and discomfort had chipped away at their quality of living. So she simply began by telling jokes about the differences between men and women. Within 5 minutes, she had the entire room in stitches, so to speak, laughing at themselves, the ways they behave, got them to nod knowingly at the truth of what she said. God's health clown, in a way. Have you ever had this experience? You're feeling down, maybe depressed or discouraged, when a friend comes along and lightens your load with some good-natured humor. Without thinking, you get drawn into laughter, and the more you laugh, the better you feel. Art Buchwald once said, I went into humor because I had only 2 choices, either to be funny or to kill people. I owe my humor to my life in the orphanage, he says, and a series of foster homes. I found the best way to get people to love me was through humor. Now, I'm no humorist, but I like to laugh. I really love to hear my kids laugh. Laughing at myself or laughing at someone's funny story. You know, when I do find a newspaper, I admit I no longer start with the comics. But after glancing through the serious headline news in the first section, now if I've already done the crossword, I just as soon look at the funnies as anything else. The comics hold this warped mirror up to our faces, so we don't take ourselves or our situations too seriously. And maybe for just a brief moment or two, they help us to get rid of the scowls. Solomon was right. A cheerful heart is healing to the bones. So just for fun, I want to share a humorous church story with you. Imagine a bored 12-year-old sitting in church with his mother. The summer night was stifling, the windows were open, and some moths were flying around the ceiling lights. The evangelist had waxed eloquent for 45 minutes, and the lad had propped his feet up in the pew in front of him. And then it happened, completely unplanned. He made a very natural but embarrassing noise. The noise was loud enough to turn all the heads in the front back to him and his mother. So the boy turned and looked at his mom, as if to say, "Shame on you." So right in the middle of a very serious revival meeting, the sounds of muffled snorts and wheezes and snickers broke out and spread throughout the entire right side of the church. Have you ever desperately tried to stop laughter once it picks up momentum? Just when you think you can contain it, you happen to glance at the other person's eyes and you lose it all over again? The two could have slunk out in embarrassment that night, but instead, they laughed. All of this discussion about laughter, it leads us to an interesting story. The story has humor and a lot of belly laughter at its core. Frederick Buechner imagines the story like this. An old woman laughs. And after a lifetime in the desert, her face is cracked and rutted like a 6-month drought, and she hunches her shoulders around her ears and starts to shake, and then the squints, she closes her eyes, and her laughter is all teeth, and wheeze and tears running down as she rocks back and forth in the chair. She is laughing because she is pushing 90. And has just been told she's gonna have a baby. An angel told her this piece of news, but she still can't control herself, and her husband can't control himself either. He keeps a straight face for a few minutes, but in the end he's cracking up too. The angel smirks, tries desperately not to laugh, so he hides his mouth behind his wing, but still, you can see it in their eyes. Now, not all laughter is healthy, of course. Laughter can be negative. Laughter can be entrenched with cynicism and disbelief. We've all laughed at the wrong things at the wrong time, at people or situations that left a bad taste in our mouth. Some laughter can masquerade as a refusal to believe. I've sat among clergy who have had this kind of laughter before. It seems like they've lost their faith sometimes. What a joke. We can't do that. We can't afford this youth ministry. Why are we spending good money on Haiti? I can't wait till I retire. I've heard that kind of sick laughter from clergy who had long ago made the slide from mission to maintenance. One minister told me once that his church had been in maintenance since 1994. If we were without promise, without community, without the Spirit, there would be plenty of things to scowl about, to glower at. If we just focus on our unfaithfulness, our lack of faith, our sin, our shortcomings, our lack of vision, our dwindling resources, and dwindling numbers, there's definitely a lot to furl our brow about. Now, Abraham and Sarah, they started out with that kind of laughter. Bitter laughter. Cynical laughter. They had by this time learned to live with their barrenness. They'd resigned themselves to a closed future, and hopelessness was their norm. So when the gospel promise comes to them initially, they meet it with the laughter of unbelief. But their journey doesn't end with a cackle of hopelessness. For God speaks a probing question into their future. Is anything too hard for the Lord? That is the question around which this entire story revolves. Is anything too hard for the Lord? That question is an open one. It still waits for an answer from us. And don't think you can skitter past this story and avoid that question. The question surfaces everywhere in the Bible. It's the fundamental question that we all must answer. And how we answer that question will determine our laughter. If the question is answered, yes, some things are too hard, too impossible for God, then we failed to confess God as Lord of all. If, on the other hand, we say, no, nothing is impossible for God, then we can fully entrust our lives to God and to no other. Then we can laugh at ourselves. We can laugh with God when He speaks word into our future. Abraham and Sarah will eventually shift from the cynical laugh to the faith-filled belly laugh. They will laugh because God is going to shatter all the confines of human limitation. God's going to break through the dark night of barrenness. God's going to create a possibility out of impossibility. Now, Sarah laughs, though it does take her 9 months, because God has up and done the unthinkable. Her laughter is a bold surprise at what God is capable of doing. Her laughter, it's evangelical. We're not left to work this out by ourselves. The God who promises life into our barrenness will be with us to the very moment when God fulfills the promise. This past week, I should have been at annual conference, gathering with other Methodists and my clergy friends from around Kentucky. I was reminded of a story from years past. Amidst all the seriousness and the business of the week, amidst all the grave concerns about shrinking dollars and theological confusion and sidetracking and politicking, amidst the quibbling about who's progressive or conservative, I heard it. Again, this was a couple years ago. A pastor got up and said, "Who would have believed that anything could happen at my church? We were as good as dead." He went on to say that God had pulled the unimaginable on the unexpecting congregation, and that dilapidated church suddenly became a church again. The church grew beyond wildest expectations, and another pastor told us that in the past 5 years, 25 small groups had sprung up in their church, and so many more wanted to join. They had to have a waiting list. The pastor and the congregation got tired of dwindling numbers, and they had turned to God in earnest. And laughter broke out among the youth when they found out that they had raised more money than the adults for their mission trips. But they're not professional fundraisers, they said. They're kids, but oh, go ahead and laugh. Sarah laughed a belly laugh, a laugh of astonishment at God's ability to do the impossible. So you have probably guessed what happened 9 months later. 9 months after God promised the 90-year-old a son. Yep, it happened, but you would not have a problem picking that baby out in the maternity ward. The nurse going through, checking on the babies. Hello, Bruce. Hello, Betty. Hi, little Barbara. But when she gets to Sarah and Abraham's little cutie, hey, somebody messed up with Abraham's baby. Why'd some joker write the name Laughter on the crib? Isaac in Hebrew means laughter. Sarah and Abraham finally get the joke. They celebrate God's humor by naming their baby Laughter. There's an awful lot of seriousness going on in our world. Not one, but 2 viruses, COVID-19, racism. They both have effects on the economic and physical well-being of much of our population. It's at best difficult to know what the next step should be. The rules seem to be changing faster than we can keep up. But God will have the last laugh. For from Isaac, the humor of God will carry out a much larger plan to bless the entire world through people like us who can laugh with God. Where will God lead us? What will be our next steps? I honestly do not know. But I believe we are called to follow with a smile and a sense of adventure, and yes, even with some laughter. Amen.
I Bible the promise of God that nothing for him is too hard. Impossible things he has promised to do if we faithfully trust in his word. Nothing is impossible when you put your trust in God. Nothing is impossible when you're trusting in his word. Hearken to the voice of God to thee. Is there anything too hard for me? Then put your trust in God alone and rest upon his word. For everything, oh everything, yes everything is possible with God. Creator of all things with infinite power, he spoke, they appeared by his mouth. Impossible things are not known unto him. He made us, he ruleth the earth. Nothing is impossible when you put your trust in God. Nothing is impossible when you're trusting